together. I will present the pillars of sustainability and then why do we care about sustainability so much, or why did we start caring about sustainability so much recently. In that, we're going to be discussing the changing demographics of the world and Bahrain in particular, and the impacts on humans and the environment. I will later present the visions for a better future in terms of our environment, urban environment, and therefore how it reflects on our investments. And then I'll focus on the second half of the presentation, specifically on the impacts on investment. I will be showing a small interesting video of 2 minutes on how banks in Bahrain are shifting towards sustainability and green finance. And then we'll talk about the growing interest in sustainability in the financial sector and investment in general. The position of the chief sustainability officer today in different organizations and in capital markets, and how it will impact the establishment of more sustainable practices in such organizations. And the last topic we're going to cover is the green bonds as an example for sustainable investment instruments today in Bahrain. And we will finally conclude with the concluding remarks. So what do we think sustainability is? How can we define sustainability? We all have some conceptualization of what we consider a sustainable behavior and what is not a sustainable behavior. We know the general themes like recycling and being efficient in our usage of the material, of energy and resources and so on. But if we look into the specific definition of sustainability, obviously the most known definition for sustainability is basically meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is the United Nations definition that was defined in the 1987, and we're still using it up until today. Now, other definitions of sustainability is being able to maintain a certain economy, a certain product, a certain building, a certain city at a certain level or rate. And some even claim that we can maintain that level or rate indefinitely. Sustainability also is a social goal that broadly aims for humans to safely coexist today and in the future on planet Earth over a long time. Now, if we look at those definitions and try to rethink them and redefine them, now nothing is of unlimited longevity. Everything has to end at one point, whether it is a system, whether it is an economy, whether it is a city. There's a lifetime for that product or a system or a city that we're talking about. So sustainability cannot mean maintenance forever. However, what we really aim to do with implementing sustainable strategies is to maintain a sustainable, evolving meta-system. And in order for us to do that, we need to hypothesize that, well, a particular relationship between the longevity of that system or planet or city or economy is really a component of the subsystems in it, and the relationship between time and space scales that may be necessary. So a cell, for example, has a different lifetime than a planet. In between those two very extremes are organisms, populations, and economic systems that sort of fall in between the very long life of a planet and the very short life of a cell. So we cannot expect a cell to be sustained or live as long as an economic system or as a planet. So in order us to understand sustainability deeply, we need to first of all think about the space and time scale of whatever it is that we're trying to sustain in our definition. Now, there are three main known pillars for sustainability. These are the social, the environmental, and the economic, and some people refer to them as well as people, planet, and profit. These are the same, basically, key pillars for sustainable development. And we can see them in strategies, for instance, like in Bahrain 2030 vision, the government has drafted it on those three principles of people, planet, and profit. Now, since 2015, we have seen an introduction of two other pillars. The cultural pillar, which differs than the social pillar, really. The social pillar relates to whatever we are sharing today as a society together in terms of our values, our beliefs, and the social trends that are happening. If we would put it in simple terms, social media is social media. It's not cultural media, because it is something that this generation is sharing all together. While as culture is more about our history, our tradition, our inheritance really from our ancestors and from their ancestors and so on. So more of our cultural presence is our inheritance in terms of beliefs, heritage we share together in society. Political as well, governance, as we might as well call it, for sustainable development. Unless we have a good governance system, we won't be able to have or govern or maintain the social and environmental, the economic, or the cultural. So we have seen since 2017 very much attention to governance of sustainability. So in sum, these are the 5 main pillars of sustainable development, and in any conversations about sustainability, you'd always see them discussing those points of views. Now, we have a rough understanding of what sustainability is, and some of you might even have a deeper understanding because of your involvement in certifications or trainings and so on. But why did we start paying attention to sustainability lately? Why does it matter today? If we look at us being in this world, in a vacant world, traditionally our designs, decisions, and our economies were basically based on function. The broader environmental context in which we exist was not really paid attention to. It has not been adequately considered in our processes and practices. And as a result of this neglectance to the environment, we had so many consequences, which we are going to talk about later, but like natural disasters, like climate change, and so on. So we now find many serious environmental problems emerging that brought us to think about our practices in general. Are we doing things that are really sustainable? And we are being now basically impacted about the behaviors and practices of our ancestors, because they were living in an abundance of energy, abundance of fresh air, and they have dealt with emergent technologies, emergent like industries. When the Industrial Revolution happened and we had abundance of steel, of concrete, of energy, we were able to produce things in magnificent scales. But we did not think at that time whether we really need those developments to happen, whether we really need things or processes to be of that caliber that we built in that time. So if we want to have an ecological resources to use in the future, we need to think about our practices today, whether we can sustain them in the future or not. So simply put, we live in our homes and we are surrounded by technology, by culture, by society, and embedded within that, the knowledge, the built environment, the institutions, and the structures. And all of this is really governed by the natural environment. So our atmosphere, resources, forests, water, biodiversity, soil, and sunlight, and oceans are all the umbrella in which our technology and society and the built environment is really working under. So we are really part of the environment and we're not separated from it. Therefore, we need to really think about how we impact the environment and how the environment itself impacts us in everything that we do. Now, in order for us to think about why sustainability matters, it is really healthy practice to look at how populations are growing and how the changing demographics of the world is processing. Now, in November 15th of this year, we will mark the birth of the Earth's 8 billionth inhabitants. Right now, we have about 7.9 billion inhabitants on Earth. For the first time in November 15th, we're going to reach 8 billion of people living in this Earth. So this reminds us all of our shared responsibility to care for our planet, to learn how to coexist in this planet, and to also think about how our population in general is increasing rather than decreasing. And on the contrary, our resources are decreasing. So how can we deal with this equation of an increase of population and decrease of resources in one planet, and do it in a way that is sufficient enough for the future generations to also enjoy the same levels of luxuries that we are enjoying today? Now, to give more of a local perspective to this, Bahrain's population in 2022 is hovering around at about 1.5 million inhabitants today in Bahrain. But this is also increasing like the global average. Now, to give an idea about how the demographics is changing, it's also a good practice to look at our fertility rate in Bahrain. So this is a graph that is showing our fertility rate from the 1950s to about now, and how it is really decreasing from, let's say, about 7 children per woman, for each woman in Bahrain in 1950, to less than 2 children per woman in 2022. So our population is increasing, but the fertility is declining. And this basically is caused by our increase in healthcare cost, our increase in dependency ratio, or the changes to the economy. And this changes our demographic dramatically. But our current institutional and social arrangements are unsuited for our coming aging population and the changing in demographics. Let's have a look at this at a more of a closer perspective. This is how our population looked like by age and gender in 1950. So as you might have expected, we have the younger populations who are aged. So in this graph, you will find on the right-hand side the year of birth, on the left-hand side the age, and in the horizontal line the population in thousands. So the largest amount of the population are those of a younger age, let's say from age 0 to age 40. And then they start to decline, and you'd see a very small percentage of the population who are aged 60 and above in Bahrain. This is how the population as if it would look like today in 2022. And you would see within those years between 1950 and 2022, our demographics have changed a lot. So yes, we still have a big portion of our population who are of the younger age, but also a bigger number of the population who are in their mid ages, you would say. And then if you notice this line from 60 and above in age, it is really increasing in number. Let's have a look at how the population would look like in 2100. And here is where the alarming indicators are. A lot of our population, the percentage of the population who are aged 60 and above, will increase dramatically in Bahrain. But are we ready in terms of our institutions, systems, processes, built environment to deal in a few years with an aging population? So if you go back to rethink the definition of sustainability, and it is our ability to enjoy our systems and environments and ecosystems and political systems and economic systems today in a way that would not compromise our future generations to enjoy it in the same way that we do today. Are we really doing the necessary change for this to happen? So to give you also another perspective of why we are focusing on sustainability so much in these years, this is a graph that we like to show in our presentations about how the world temperature is increasing. The world temperature is increasing. This shows us how the temperature increases from the 1900s, certainly the beginning of the 20th century, to sort of now where we are approaching the mid of the 21st century to 2016. And if you look at how the temperature is increasing in all over the world, it is really alarming. This is causing a lot of natural disasters caused by global warming. I'm sure you've heard today about Hurricane Ian, which has hit Florida, one of the 5th strongest hurricanes to hit Florida in the US now, and it has left more than 2 million houses and businesses out of electricity. Now, a lot of heat waves we are seeing every summer, again, hurricanes, tsunamis, and fires. And this is really stressing on our food security, water security, and it causes us also an energy crisis. Now, human rights concerns because of allocation of people and movement of people between countries because of wars as well, and relating that to energy crisis, which we are seeing around us today. This gives us also the opportunity to think about how can we preserve our cultural heritage and protect it in the midst of all of these changes. Concerns about our health and well-being are all alarming indicators that basically pushes us to think about more sustainable behaviors that could come in the future in all of our systems. Now, this debate have not started recently. We have always, since historical times, been envisioning a better future. Let me show you how we have done that in a few slides to come. Now, smart sustainability or smartability is what we're trying to think about today as a global reaction to climate change, as a way to sort of future-proof our cities with climate-smart solutions to create smart and sustainable cities that could future-proof us from what is going to happen next. This is an image in the 1920s from Gray's cigarette advertisement. And this is how they have envisioned the city of London and how it's going to look like in the year 2500. Very aspiring image of how they envision things flying around and us working in different levels in our cities. Now, let me shock you a little bit more as well. These two images, the left one is from the New York Turbine from 1910, really at the beginning of the 20th century. And the one on the right-hand side is from the 1920s, 1925. And this is how they have looked at and how they envisioned life to be or to look like in the 1950s. They have seen that we had dealt with our pollution that came after the Industrial Revolution. And we had pedestrianized our streets. We have beautiful and elegant high-rise living, and we have pushed our toxic environments underground, like the motors and traffic and all of that. Now, up until today, we didn't see this happening in our world. Up until NEOM came and have envisioned now basically the implementation of such ideas that emerged in the early 20th century. So we had the plans for NEOM that they have initially claimed to complete them in 2025. Of course, there were a lot of constraints to this project, as there were constraints to many projects that were envisioned in the beginning of the 20th century. The completion of the project is now set to 2030 instead of 2025. So we're really keeping an eye on this environment that imagines that we can build in the middle of the desert, 10% Celsius cooler environment than the rest of the GCC with 100% renewable energy. That is in really close distance to 40% of the world, where we can use and harvest our natural resources and use the technology that we have in the world today to build better resilient communities. Now, what is the impact of sustainability on investment? how does that relate to our eco-political systems? Let me share with you a small video of 2 minutes by Mr. Abdulaziz, who's the CEO of GIB Bank. He's been talking about how the landscape of the financial sector has been changing in the last few years, just I would say 3 years in Bahrain, to include matters of sustainability. We have seen at board levels a lot of discussions about how sustainability could be embedded within the strategies of the financial sector, capital markets specifically. We have seen that Bahrain boards have introduced in June of 2020 its voluntarily reports to sustainability, and we are seeing recently in the earlies of 2022, the CBP has included climate reduction or climate response in our financial institutions to the reporting of our banks and how they would deal with climate risks in their strategies. And just a few days back, we have also seen the CBP inclusion of women in boards in the banking sector. So let's hear Mr. Abdulaziz talking about some of these.
The increased momentum in sustainable and green finance-linked products and services and investments is influencing the future strategic direction of Bahrain's banking sector. Banks are expected to play a prominent role in enabling the kingdom to realize its vision of private sector-led sustainable economic growth by 2030. Bahrain has undertaken major steps towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in its economic vision of 2030. Various initiatives by a few leading banks in terms of introducing sustainable and ESG-related products and reportings, but also efforts are there to promote sustainable and transparent capital markets in Bahrain. Bahrain Bourse issued its ESG voluntary reporting guideline for listed companies in June 2020. It has also joined the United Nations Sustainable Stock Exchange, the SSE, an initiative to demonstrate its voluntary commitment towards creating sustainable capital markets, underpinned by principles of sustainability, fairness, and competitiveness. Early 2022, the Central Bank of Bahrain has set out guidelines for the banking sector around how it should be working to incorporate climate-related risks in their strategies. Banks have a key role to play in transitioning into a more sustainable economic model. The COVID pandemic has contributed to an acceleration in the trend towards ESG. It acted as a wake-up call about the vulnerability and fragility our world is currently facing. The issuance of green, social, and sustainable finances picked up sharply. GIB issued a sustainability-linked syndicated loan in October 2021, the first in Bahrain and one of the first in the region. This transaction raised $625 million, having upsized the offer following strong investor demand, encouraging human resource policies that are female-friendly, the first loan with ESG targets, including female-gender ratios.
So it's very interesting to see how the financial sector is really paying attention to sustainability, and not only the financial sector really. If we look at the graph here in front of you, the increase in interest in sustainability in capital markets around the world. If we look at the US, for instance, the first chief sustainability officer position was in 2004. By the year 2011, we had 29 chief sustainability officers in America publicly traded companies. And in the year 2020, we have seen also a very much increase of the number of chief sustainability officers. The Fortune 500 companies have hired more CSOs than in the previous 3 years combined. So there is a great increase in the very few past years in the establishment of specific sustainability units. So the COVID pandemic have, of course, played a great role, as you've heard from Mr. Abdulaziz's interview shortly that I have presented to you. The reason why the COVID pandemic has put a lot of pressure as well on businesses is because we have so in the past few years while we were dealing with the COVID pandemic, how we can all be disrupted, how all of our processes, our built environment, our social coexistence with each other could be really disruptive with anything that could impact us in a way that is a social, let's say, a health problem like the COVID pandemic, or any other magnificent of that caliber and scale problem like we're seeing with Hurricane Ian, for instance, like a hurricane or a tsunami that could happen to us. So the COVID factor has pressured us to pay attention, to think about how we can sustain and make our systems and structures and economies more resilient in the future, more resilient that it can take hits from anything that relates to technology problems, to health problems, to problems that are related to the weather and that could affect us in any way. So we are trying to envision a sustainable future and put the strategies and targets to meet that vision, and to make our systems more resilient in the future, and to progress on the universal challenge on those 5 pillars of sustainability that I have introduced to you at the beginning of this presentation. So chief sustainability officers are being tasked in different organizations globally and also locally with identifying and harnessing resources from government, from business alliances, and from the society at large. And their role is basically to repair and rebuild and anticipate future challenges before they actually happen and before we feel the negative impact that they could have on our bottom line. Now, there's a critical changing role as well. This ESG or sustainability movement has grown into a global phenomena, specifically in the last 5 or 3 years, representing more than 30 trillion US in assets under management over the last 20 years. And whoever manages those matters is expected to oversee diverse but also related issues that relate to supply chain risks, employers' health, safety, and impacts of climate risk. Now, to make a meaningful impact, the Chief Sustainability Officer must have a seat at the table. Previously, we have seen, and up until today, honestly speaking, in our markets, we have seen teams, HR teams, marketing teams, being tasked with the task of looking also after sustainability reporting and initiatives, but that's not really a healthy practice. So unlike those past years when someone in any department in the company would take a 6 weeks training program on sustainability and being asked to handle this matter, today chief sustainability officers are expected to have a significant scientific background on the topic to be able to handle that and to be freed and to be given the empowerment by boards of organizations and capital markets to really make meaningful decisions and changes into those organizations. It is not only important today to report on sustainability or to report on how well or bad we're doing on sustainability, but to have those reports really impact our processes needs a dedicated team to look at how we can achieve that in our organizations today. Let me just give a very short example about how sustainability is changing the way we're investing today. We have seen in recent years the introduction of green bonds into our sustainability landscapes or investment landscapes in Bahrain. Green bonds, like any other bonds, they are fixed income instruments that are designed to support specific climate-related or environmental projects. Climate projects or climate-related investment opportunities are pooled into what we call the green bonds. And often green bonds are giving incentives by governments because they want to push for such bonds to be taken by investors. So tax incentives encourage people to invest in them. They make them attractive, and they are really healthy for the environment. But we need to also look at the implementation of green bonds, that we're not doing any greenwashing. We're not claiming that we are pooling our investments in green bonds, but we're really not doing so in the best way possible. And we're just using it as a way of a marketing tool, because that would go against our values of really implementing sustainability. So green bonds are also sometimes called climate bonds or sustainable bonds. They all basically the same thing. So they are part of a larger trend in socially responsible and ESG investment. But just to give you an example of how sustainability is changing, also the instruments that we use to invest today, and there are many examples. I wish there was the time in the presentation to give today, but green bonds is certainly one thing that has been recently introduced to Bahrain. I want to close up this presentation and end and leave you with this quote. In the long run, the cost of investing in sustainability is less than the cost of not investing in it. Disruption, in its negative sense, would be a greater cost, be it environmental, social, or operational to any of our environments. So today is the day for us to think about how important is sustainability. Today is the day that we work on future-proofing our organizations, ourselves, our environments, our houses, to be able to sustain them for the future generations in the best way that we can. So thank you very much for giving me the time and opportunity to share with you today my thoughts and ideas about sustainability, and I look forward to any collaborations in the future. Please feel free to scan the barcode on the screen where you can find my information, and you can just save it in your contacts in your mobile and get in touch with me in the future and anything that I can help with. And I'd be delighted to take any questions if you have any. Allow me to stop the presentation now and start the Q&A session. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Yes, go ahead, Belen. Thank you for attending.
Hi, Dr. Faye. I hope you're doing well. Congratulations on yesterday's, what's it called? It's not a seminar, but rather gathering at BIBF. Apologies, I wasn't able to attend, but you know, if I was able to take a flight back from London, I would have definitely attended. My first question is about the interactions with the pillars of sustainable development. Wouldn't you say for that graph between social, environmental, economic, cultural, and political type of factors, that it would be better to represent them all under one single type of interaction, given that they're all interlinked with one another? For example, like, you know, economic outcomes can affect cultural, social, environmental outcomes, and so on. Wouldn't you say it would be better to kind of put those different factors together rather than in that sort of ring type of diagram?
Thank you very much for the question, Bel, and I would agree with you. Certainly, there is a huge deal of interaction between all of these pillars. For instance, if we would look at the governance or the political pillar, we won't be able to achieve any of the other pillars if we were not to focus on also how to govern all of these and how to put in the right policies, the right practices in place so that we can achieve really and measure and impact on social sustainability or economic sustainability and so on. So yes, there is a great interaction. In the graph that I've shown, there are overlappings between the different bubbles, but this is just a very superficial way of showing the complexity, the great deal of complexity between all of this. And let me just draw or put an underline under the government of Bahrain establishing a sustainable development ministry, a whole ministry. They could have established an office, a unit, a body, but it was a whole ministry dedicated to sustainable development because the issue is that complex. there's a huge deal of complexity, and all of these matters needs dealing on their own, but also need to be looked at from the bigger perspective so that we can see the interaction between social sustainability, cultural sustainability, economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and how each of those pillars would affect each other. I hope I answered the question, Belen, but yeah, I agree with you. It's a very complex undertaking.
Definitely, yes. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you very much, Belen. I don't know if there are any other questions. I'd be delighted to answer them.
Fatma, there is a question from Fatma Ahmed.
Okay, apologize.
In the chat. Okay, no worries.
Are there any incentives introduced for investors to invest in green bonds in Bahrain? Now, see, if you were to ask me, Fatma, I think we should be doing better in terms of providing incentives, generally speaking, not only for green bonds, but everything that we do. We see a little bit of initiatives here and there to give incentives basically to investors or people in general, the general public, when they are taking green initiatives, whether it is buying a green bond or installing solar panels on roofs or building a house based on sustainability principles. But that's just not enough. Specifically in a country where we have a lot of subsidy to a lot of our services and processes. So I think we need to be doing much more than what we're doing now to, at least in these first few years of implementing sustainability solutions, to push people to really think about implementing them, whether it is in their investment strategies or portfolio, or whether it is to install solar panels in their homes and give them the right incentives or offer them the specific loans that are needed for them to do that. I don't think we're doing enough, if that answers the question differently. But I hope in the future we would see a bigger reaction from basically the government or also the private sector to support different initiatives that are looking for implementing sustainability in different sectors. I don't know if there are any other questions, or maybe we should wrap up. Mira, if I go back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Faye. Is there any other questions you would like to raise to Dr. Faye? Please. You can unmute your mic. You can write in the chat. I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mira from BIBF, for arranging the session, and thank you all for attending the session today. It gave me a really great pleasure to be with you here to share my opinions and humble perspectives on sustainability. And please feel free to get in touch with me in the future. Thank you so much.